Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Downtime in the Ring. This week, we are with Donovan, Dijak. We have two Donovans this time. This is awesome. We are also here with Chris and myself, Donovan. We are super excited to be able to talk to this man about his time in WWE, his time on the Indies, how he is having a hell of a run right now, and many, many other things. Thank you, sir, for being here. We are super excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. It's great that you guys have both of my names. That's spectacular.
Uh,
Chris
I,
and Donovan.
I was about to ask, how does it feel being interviewed by two people who have the name similar to yours? But yeah, no, it's a pleasure to meet you. I think you are the first WWE superstar, former superstar that we've had on the show. So again, pleasure to meet you. I reached out to you. Wanted to do this interview a while back. Ever since you had gotten released initially, but now here we are. So
Yeah, for sure. Looking forward to it.
So we want to first talk about Dijak Wrestling and what you do with New England Pro Wrestling. If you want to talk a little bit about that, because I've gotten to see even how you interact with people, and how much they have to put into wrestling to even begin. What made you want to help the next generation of wrestlers, and what still gets you going, because I know coaching, and we have had former coaches on the show. It's a whole lot that goes into it for a professional wrestler.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing for me is in a way it's almost still a learning process for me. Because I discover lots about professional wrestling just from talking, having a source with I guess selfishly in a way, it's really just an outlet for me to sort of, you know, bleed my mind of all the things that I'm constantly thinking about, right? This originally, by this I mean the Dijak Wrestling Academy sort of started with a long plane ride that I was on, really. And I just opened my notepad on my phone, and I started just writing down like all the things that were just in my brain about professional wrestling, right? Like, why do we do it this way? Why do I take these steps? What's this thing called? Why am I always thinking about this? Why do I do this to the audience? What should, just enlisting it over and over again. And I felt like I had to organize it somehow. So it just kept going. And then so the kind of concept that I had was based off of my acting coach. His name is Howard Fine. You can visit his website. He's probably the best acting coach in the world, in my opinion. He's got a laundry list of A-list actors and stuff that he helps constantly. But he also takes the time to do online classes for anyone, really anyone who wants to take it can take his entry level class with him. And it's on Zoom. And so there's just, 15, 20 people in a Zoom chat, and he goes through his steps for preparing to be an actor. And it was so well organized, and everything was so interactive between him and the students and stuff. And I said, this would be a wonderful program for wrestlers if someone could organize this into wrestling and draw the parallels between the two and things like that. So that's pretty much what I did. I organized all my thoughts into my own sort of 9 steps, and then I used that as a guideline, and then I divided it into 8 weeks. And ultimately what we do now is we go through the different variations of all the things that I have written down, and just how to structure a match, the psychology of it, all the different stuff. And I give a big preface about how all of this is just my observations and my opinions, right? Because it's pro wrestling, it's subjective, very much the same way that acting is subjective, right? It's there's no right or wrong, good or bad. There's there's, tendencies that tend to, not be looked upon positively, that we try to avoid, and things like that, things that are generally accepted as not as good as, a different tendency, and things like that. But overall, it's subjective at the end of the day, and something that I think is bad could be someone else's favorite thing in the world. So, it really depends. But that's a good, it's a good starting point. It's a good jumping point. The medium allows for me to interact with people who want to learn, and I want to learn from them just as much. And I learn from myself and my own thought process from them, things like so. So to me, it's a very conducive sort of a two-way street where we're all learning from each other constantly. And to me, that's the best part of professional wrestling, right? Because a lot of this is over the course of time, it becomes less and less about what's right and what's wrong, and more about sort of learning the what's the word? I can't think of the word right now, but basically that it's an open book, and really it's a perspective. It's about learning the perspective of everything. Okay? What like this, and why do these people like that, and why does this group of people hate that, even though this group of people loves it? Things like that, and understanding how we can use that to make the correct people happy at the correct time, and get the best reactions possible, and things like that.
I love how you approach that, because in my time of watching wrestling, I love listening to how coaches like Regal talk about footwork, how Shawn talks about facial expressions or moments, and his focus on that. I'm a Shawn Michaels fan myself. And going from like their different takes on everything, and how it kind of culminates into how a professional wrestler and a wrestling match can induce that storytelling feel and engage the audience, and whichever audience across the states or even across the world, and how it can bring all that and to get together just from that culmination of advice and knowledge and stuff. But I tend to go after those two. And having been in the NXT Performance Center and working under Shawn, working under maybe Regal for a short time, or depending on Black and Gold, even in like at 2.0, was there anything, like any advice that kind of stuck with you in that regard?
Boy. So I studied and learned under both of them extensively. So it wasn't like one off or a short amount of time. Really, like Shawn, for example, was my direct coach. That was for a year. And Regal specifically was there for about 3 years in my first run, and then another almost year in my second run. So yeah, I've had, these are guys I would go to constantly for consistent feedback. So to narrow it down to just one thing would be pretty disingenuous, because both of them played such a vital role in my development over the course of time. With Shawn, it's more of just and I'll preface this by saying that Shawn Michaels is the best coach I've ever. And I hold a lot of the coaches I've had in very high regard, but he's just an outstanding coach. Just from him, my favorite thing is kind of what we just talked about, and that's the perspective of understanding. Because Shawn is very he's very aware of professional wrestling and what it is. So he's not the type of coach who gives you like specifics or direct, like, oh, do this or do that, or you should do it this way, anything like that. It's more of like a how he feels in that moment. Like, oh, what if you tried it this way for this crowd? Maybe that's correct. Maybe it's not. I don't know, because this is all subjective, right? And to me, that's sort of the essence of professional wrestling, right? It's how we feel in that exact moment. not like what my conception is, not what I think it might be, but like seeing what's happening and putting yourself in that moment and understanding that this is what my gut tells me. So perhaps that might be the right answer, but it also might not. All of that perspective to me is what, really sort of laid the foundation for how I think about it now, because that's coming from arguably the greatest professional wrestler of all time, certainly in ring. So to me, to have that level of perspective combined with that level of knowledge is, I mean, that's the definition of professional wrestling to me. In terms of Regal, just sort of a mindset about psychology and physicality and footwork, timing, things like that. He's very, very skilled in the technical aspect of in-ring professional wrestling. So I would go to him a lot for things like that, and just to sharpen things in an advanced setting. So yeah, those were the main sort of drawing points I took from those two.
Okay. Now that you have your gimmick, that you've been taking on the indies, and it seems like you've been having a lot of fun, and it's similar to what you had towards your last run in NXT.
Yep.
What made you create that? What brought that to life in a way? Because we both did our research, we both saw your college degree. Is there something about you that wanted to be in law enforcement or do anything with that? Because it looks like the whole Sin City gimmick, the whole bounty hunter gimmick, the whole
Judge
Black
Dredd
Jacket being a
style.
badass gimmick. So what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I would. It's a bit of a long story. I'll try to give you the shortened, sort of abridged version of it. Basically, I had a meeting in around WrestleMania of 2022 with Vince McMahon. We had a long discussion about the things, the things I've done in my life, my interests, and things like that. And from that whole discussion, his sticking point was the criminal mind. There's something about the criminal mind, because I brought up, as you mentioned, my criminal justice background, things like that, the movies that I like to watch. So from that conversation, basically, I just went off and I designed this whole character just based on my own background, based on what I think is interesting, a unique look, a cool backstory, things like that. I tried to draw as much from reality as I possibly could. And then I crafted the whole presentation, and I made it for him. And I don't even know whether he ever saw it or not. I gave it to either him or Johnny Ace or somebody. Maybe he saw it, maybe he didn't. Nothing came of it. And then he wasn't there anymore, and then all of a sudden I was in an NXT. So I had this pre drafted character ready to go, and I said I'd love to do this here in NXT, and they were all for it. NXT was at the tail end of sort of 2.0, where like everybody kind of had like a gimmick and a job and stuff like that, but they were also transitioning into what I call the white and gold era, where it was like they want to put a refocus on great matches and in-ring stuff and driven by psychology and things like that. So I said, I think this would be a perfect way to bridge the gap between what you wanted to get out of that, which is this like sort of unique character, era into this new era. I feel like I can kind of fill both of those roles very well, while also bringing in some of the the old feel that we used to have in the competitiveness of black and gold and things like that. And they loved the idea, and we just ended up running with it. We really fleshed it out over the course of the the year and a half that I was there. And yeah, ever since I've no longer been with WWE, I continue to progress it and figure out what the newest version of myself in this character is going to be, and what it's going to look like. I will admit of and it's difficult. I'm fortunate to be on MLW right now, which has a pretty good outreach, but a lot of it's on YouTube and things like that. So we don't have, you know, the 700, 800,000 people or whatever, plus the social media reach that WWE has. So like, you know, when you adjust a character without that vehicle, it takes more time, right? Because you have to sort of continually reinforce to the point whereas you could have done it in 2 weeks in WWE, because the outreach is so broad, it takes months in a different setting. So that's kind of the uphill battle of it at this point. But you know, I'm going to continue to trend in that direction. I think, you know, staying stagnant is not an effective strategy or tool in the world of professional wrestling. I think it's comfortable and it's safe, but I don't think it's progressive, and I don't think it breeds, you know, sort of the creativity that I love of professional wrestling. So I'm always going to trend in that direction as much as I can.
You know, you said MLW, and I recently watched your match with Matt Riddle at Arena Mexico. How was that for you? I know in a previous podcast you had mentioned that was one of your kind of dreams to work in Mexico for the first time and stuff. How was that whole setup for you? Unfortunately, of course, you didn't win the MLW championship due to shenanigans from Riddle's side of things, but how was that?
So the match with Riddle was not, you'll be surprised to hear this, it was not in Arena Mexico, even though the crowd was 100% pro Mexican. So what happens is we run this event, and I think it's called Cicero Stadium in Chicago. It's in, you know, it's in a part of Chicago that is just heavily Hispanic, basically. And so the crowd that comes out, they're just hardcore luchador fans. And then we bring in the CMLL guys, and it's basically like we're having a CMLL show in Chicago. But that's where that match took place. But as you mentioned, I did get the opportunity to wrestle in Arena Mexico, mostly tag matches, and that was a couple weeks before that for today. You know, it was a few weeks ago, week before that show in Chicago. So yeah, I was able to wrestle in Arena Mexico, I think 3 times. So yeah, it was a great experience. Wonderful sort of figuring out what that crowd is looking for specifically, and things like that. So yeah, it was a really unique and special experience for me.
How does it feel now, you know, compared to when you first signed with WWE and now you're seeing the indies now? How does it feel to see some of these newer guys come up and kind of get to have a match with them, get to go to the back, get to talk to them and see what they need to work on? And, you know, if they ask you anything, because I saw that you got to go up against Zilla. I've seen, you know, you've had a exciting run. It's super exciting getting to see, you know, the posters of you and seeing where you're going next. So this new wave of or this new generation of wrestlers, you know, who sticks out to you? And do you feel young again going into this and being like, oh man, I can see that guy, I get to go up against that guy and all this, and seeing these next guys come up?
It doesn't make me feel young. It makes me feel old, to be honest, because everybody's much younger than me. It's kind of the way I felt when I first, you know, moved back to NXT, because it was weird, because it was a very short window of time. I got, like, I was never the young guy in NXT per se in when I first started, even though I was like kind of in the younger ballpark of people. But you know, there was a bunch of us around. I started when I was 30 in WWE with NXT in 2017. So then, you know, from 31 to 32 to 33 to 34, I was there that whole time. And then I got called up to Raw, And when I was on Raw, I was actually like really on the younger side of things because the Raw roster at that time trended much older. It still does. It's still, 40s, 45, stuff like that. So I was on the younger end of the Raw roster for a while. And then it was like, boom, overnight, I got moved down to NXT and they had gutted the whole thing and brought in all these brand new kids like within that 2-year window. So all of a sudden I was back on NXT. In terms of a calendar, I hadn't aged that much. But in terms of the locker room, all of a sudden I was the oldest person in the locker room by like 10 or 15 years. So I was like, oh no, like how did this happen so quickly? And then from there, I went, I aged 2 years while I was there, and now I'm on the indies, and it's even, a year later than that. And it's like, now everyone's super young, it's like, there's a little bit of a mix, right? I go to MLW and there's a lot of veterans in the MLW locker room and stuff. So yeah, but like a lot of the indie shows I do, for example, I'm the veteran on the show, and I'm the oldest guy on the show and things like that. But to answer your question, which I've been beating around for 2 minutes now, yeah, there's a ton of young talent on the independent scene. Half of them have been ID'd by WWE already, so they're doing that thing, between yeah. I'm almost hesitant to list names because I'm just going to forget half of the. I've had the great opportunity to wrestle a bunch of them. The ones that I've wrestled multiple times are like Aaron Rourke, who I think is outstanding. Alec Price, who I think is outstanding. Who else have I wrestled multiple times? See, I already hate that I've started listing names because now I feel like I'm going to forget some. There's a ton of people who I've had the great fortune of wrestling. The interesting part about WWE is that there's only so many people on that roster, especially if you're part of a brand, right? Like I was in Raw for so long that I wrestled most of like the mid card or the lower mid card and stuff like that. It's hard to get into the mix with the main eventers because they all kind of wrestle each other and stuff. But yeah, I was able to have the great fortune of wrestling like a good portion of the Raw roster. Same with NXT Black and Gold, especially because I was on the house shows for them, so it was like constantly just wrestling the same guys. And then we got to that point with Black and Gold where it was like, I was in the mix with the top guys now and the mid, and I was able to wrestle the mid card and the lower mid card on the house shows and stuff like that. So there was really a time in WWE where it's like you're just desperately trying to wrestle like the 3 or 4 people that you haven't wrestled yet, and even that even those start to happen too. But now when it's on the independent scene, it's like, yes, there's some repeats like the ones I mentioned, but for the most part, it's like a new person every single night. So you're just traveling all over. I'm going to Scotland on Friday. I'm going to wrestle somebody in Scotland that's a young kid. So I'm looking forward to that. It's constantly, it feels like everywhere I go, I get to go to India and wrestle people who are learning wrestling. I get to go to France and wrestle dudes who are learning, trying to get better at wrestling. California, the South, Canada, all over the place, and it's so often now that it's almost this mix between like guys I'm familiar with and some guys that are newer and some guys that are veteran. It's this wonderful mix. But yeah, there's a ton of talent and a ton of promise. So I really enjoy the role of kind of not knowing what I'm going to get on any particular night, but also having a lot more control over what the product ultimately ends up being, because at this point pretty much everyone I wrestle is either less experienced than me or equally as experienced as me, and then it becomes more of a collaborative effort. Whereas in WWE, yeah, there was some of that, but especially on Raw, for example, like a lot of the time you're wrestling guys who have more experience than you, like I said, because I trended a little younger, so then it becomes less collaborative, especially with the element of Vince and TV and things like that. It becomes less of like, here's what I want to do, and more of like, here's what Vince told me to do. So so that's kind of the refreshing part of having the opportunity to be on the independent scene now.
And when you're on the independents, man, like honestly, how big of a rush from the fans coming up to you is it? And we've seen it before, especially with one Matt Riddle. We got to work an event out in Texas, and he was on the poster, so it went crazy. Like, is it still that thing, where people will mention Retribution or they will mention Dijak, from either point of black and gold or white and gold? Like, what does that feel to you when you see all these fans come up excited to see you?
Yeah, no, it's it's good. It's good. It's very helpful to get out of the bubble of like Twitter and social media. Because a lot of the time, especially in WWE, like that's your only feedback. Because like the crowds are, yes, the crowd is feedback, but the crowd is kind of responding to like booking, and that's pretty much it. Because like your music hits, and really it's more of a reaction of like how much of this person have we seen, um because like that's all they know, right? They watch the television program. It's like, how often have I seen this person on the television program? There can be little parts of it that play more of a role and generate more reactions and things like that, but for the most part, like for example, I'd come out on NXT and I'd get a pretty good reaction. Then you'd come out on Monday Night Raw and it'd be not so much a reaction, especially when I was like T-Bar, uh not in the mask, but when I was like T-Bar, just kind of like whatever on Monday Night Raw, I'd come out and get very little reaction because I just wasn't on the show very often, right? So I'm not like angry or bitter about that. That's just kind of the product and how it is.
Mhm.
So really the only feedback that you're getting is the live crowd there that's just kind of reacting to what they're being given, and then social media, which is notoriously negative, right? So
Yep.
because it's a platform, it's an effective platform for people who are outspoken, right? If someone's happy about something, they usually don't mention it, right, in a Yelp review or whatever. But if something's not going the way, then you're a little louder about it. So I understand how that works. Sort of to circle back to your original question, being able to be at the merch table and interact with the people one-on-one and have these conversations with them, and to hear the sort of overwhelming positivity about it is very refreshing and very reassuring, because I didn't get a lot of that in WWE. For the most part, it was really only just like the crowds that kind of line up outside the show, and then I could go and have interactions with them and talk with them a little bit. But even then, it's like security's there, there's a gate in the way and all this stuff. So it was never like really personal. It was more like you'd take a picture and like have a quick chat or whatever. Whereas at the merch table and in these meet and greets and these comic cons and things like that, you get a lot more sort of in-depth conversation. I get to do these interviews where I get to talk with people in depth, whereas in WWE you really only do the interviews that they tell you to do. So yeah, it's nice to be able to have those conversations. Yes, I do hear a lot about Retribution, and yes, I do hear a lot about my time in Black and Gold and the matches that people liked and stuff like that. But it's very positive, right? And again, like if somebody doesn't like me, they're probably not coming up to the merch table to give me a ration of feedback. But at the same time, I do stay pretty busy when I'm interacting with the fans, and for the most part, it's very positive. People usually say something along the lines of like we wish that we wish that Retribution went better, things like that. It's reassuring to hear that people have that perspective to understand, because again, a lot of, especially at that time when like a lot of our only feedback was through Twitter and social media and stuff, because it was the Thunderdome and there was it was like overwhelming negativity, and a lot of it felt like it was directed at us, like we were the ones making mistakes and it was like our fault, like Retribution, so this makes no sense and they're such idiots and like this is garbage and T-Bar sucks, and it's like you're reading that and I'm like, how do they not understand that like I didn't like write my lines, I didn't say like, oh, T-Bar should say this and my name should be T-Bar, and I like there's some criticism for how it was come up with, but for the most part, it was like very like directed at us. Which, on the one hand, you try to internalize as like, okay, I'm a bad guy, and they don't like me as a bad guy, but it didn't feel like that. It felt more like, oh, they didn't want to see us get beat up. They want to see us not exist anymore. And that's sort of a deflating kind of feeling while you're putting, you're doing your best. You're like really like investing in trying to make something work, and to just get like overwhelmingly, the overwhelming feedback of like, we do not want you to be there anymore is discouraging. But now I get to sort of deal with the other side of the sword, which is nice.
As far as like the Thunderdome era and stuff like that, I'll admit I was kind of iffy about the whole Retribution, how it kind of came about, considering the sphere of events that was occurring at the time and like all that. But I loved your perspective on that whole era, of that whole 2-year time period of, it was a glass half full sort of thing. In previous podcasts you were mentioning like, I'm just sitting here with my friends enjoying Raw in an empty ass arena. This is like awesome. Yeah. And whenever I'm thinking about that, I'm like, that is kind of awesome. Like, is there something from that era, as far as not just like watching Raw as they're putting it on, like having that perspective of, oh, they're putting it on for me and you're just in the rafters. Is there something that you enjoyed about the pandemic era that was kind of lost once everything came back to live events and stuff? Albeit with Vince being there, of course. So
yeah, honestly, there's a lot. There really was a lot. It was so unique and so different. I look back on it with like, I don't know. It's almost like just a complete like magnification of all the feelings I was having, right? Because on the one hand, I look back on it like with extreme positivity, right? With all the things that I got to do that like made me feel good and made me feel positive. Like, you got to think, like, this was at a time when lots of people were losing their job, and not only did I not lose my job, I got a big pay raise and a big promotion, and all of a sudden now I was like doing the opening monologue of Monday Night Raw, and we were doing like the closing monologue of Monday Night Raw, and we were the ones standing tall at the end of Monday Night. So there's a ton of positivity. Right, I got to meet and talk to and work under Vince McMahon's direct supervision, things like that. So these were all like we were on pay-per-views, we were being booked for pay-per-views and things like that. So in the moment, and again, I'm sharing all of this with like literally my best friends in the business, right? Combined with the fact that like a lot of like travel was easier. I had moved into this house that I'm in right now. We'd finished building it, so I was now living back in New England. So I was traveling to Florida, and travel for me was way easier. Even though you had the mask and all that stuff, like there was like nobody on planes, so I was flying on planes by myself. There was a unique camaraderie about like testing for COVID. Like we had to test every day, and so I got to become really good friends with like the doctors and stuff like that. So there's a ton of positives. On the other side of that, there was a lot of like heavy negativity, right? Like, just as a starting point, like tons of people were getting sick and dying in the world. Like that was horribly negative. The mystery of COVID, like freaking out about like washing all my stuff and washing my hands and trying to avoid getting it because we didn't know what it was. It was weighing heavily on me. My daughter was born in July of 2020, so she's an infant. So I'm like, I can't get sick, or I'll get my infant daughter sick, and I don't know what. So that's weighing on me. The fear of what would happen when I got it, the fear of getting booster shots. Eventually, of course, like everyone, I did get it, and it's like, how is this going to affect me? Am I going to, should I? the also playing a role into work, because if you got it, then your work was all of a sudden affected, and that happened at one point, and we were off Raw because we were around other people who were affected, and all of that stuff, and all of that combined with also, by the way, your name's T-Bar, and his name's Slapjack, and his name's Mace, and you guys are. And then we're reading like the creative storyline, and we're like, this doesn't make much sense. How can we fix this? And then like I said, the negativity of social media sort of weighing on us. So in a way, I look back on it in like two very distinct, like heightened senses of like, I look back on it extremely positively, but also extremely negatively. And there's just no real other way to describe it other than it was just like a lot of very heightened emotions all in what felt like forever, but ultimately at the end of the day, it was kind of a short period of time, thankfully.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even at that time, like, we got to see unique things that, I mean, to be fair, your production meetings were probably, everybody was just throwing random things, trying to see what stuck. We got to see pre-recorded segments of like Alexa Bliss, where, she was bad, lights go out, she's good, lights come back, go back out, she's bad. We got to see, matches we didn't think that we would get to see, just because people had to stay closer together. And so that time was a very unique time, and it did shed light during a very bad part. Unfortunately, that kind of was most of Retribution. It's like living part. So I think it may have been different, like Chris said, if the world hadn't been what it was. But it is something that, you get to look back on, and you get to be like, yeah, I did that. Regardless of what anybody says, still did it.
It's interesting to really think about it, because I can say with almost 100% certainty that if the pandemic didn't happen, then Retribution wouldn't have happened. So I do like to think about like what my career would have looked like and how it would have panned out had the pandemic not happened, because like as it was trending, like for example, had the pandemic not happened, there for sure would have been a match, because I was told as much, that the plan, and again, plans change sometimes, but the takeovers were usually pretty consistent with what they would tell us. So the plan was a triple threat for the North American Championship between myself, Keith Lee, and Damian Priest at WrestleMania TakeOver in Tampa Bay.
That would have been so good.
Yeah, and we had huge plans for it. It's funny because it ended up happening. Easily one of, if not my least favorite match of my entire career, because what ended up happening is we did it in Full Sail with no crowd. So it was just like imagine taking like the greatest thing you ever pictured in your mind and like watering it down so bad to the point where you don't even want to do it anymore. And that's what we ended up doing. I've literally never even watched the match back because it's so, and ultimately it got a very poor reception, because what that match is it's a spectacle, and it's a spectacle that requires the reaction of people watching the spectacle, right? It's these three huge guys doing three things that huge guys shouldn't do. So the crowd's just, whoa, they're huge reactions to everything. And instead of getting that, you got us trying to do those things and getting no reactions. And it was just like, boy, this is depressing. So that's kind of how it translated to me anyway. And again, I think I watched it back once and I was like, this is horrible, and I never watched it back again. Not because we didn't try, but because it's not the right way to present that match. Like some matches, for example, thrived in that atmosphere. Like Walter and Ilya Dragunov is one from NXT UK that people loved, because it wasn't based on crowd reaction. It was based on how much they're hitting each other. So they were blasting each other. It's making these loud, like, sounds like thunder, clapping, because they're smashing each other so hard. So watching that is like captivating. Whereas watching, me and Keith do like a flip and it and just silence is like depressing almost. So it was a good learning experience, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, so I think about that a lot, of like how things would have panned out, and like whether I would have been called up to the main roster, and what maybe I'd still be Dominic Dijakovic, something like that. Whether I maybe just wouldn't have worked out at all, I have no idea. It's hard to say how, you know, the sort of tea leaves would have crumbled, but you know, what happened. So that's what it is. We can only play the hand we're dealt, you know.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you're done with a booking, you're about to head home, what is your go-to meal, man? Because for us, most of the time it's Whataburger. When we come back from filming an event, what's it for you, dude?
Taco Bell. Every single time Taco Bell. I with very few exceptions. Last night there wasn't a Taco Bell on the way, so I got McDonald's instead. But but yeah, 99% of the time, if there's a taco, and it wasn't always this. But when I was on the road for Monday Night Raw, usually it was like pizza. I would find like my favorite pizza joint that I could find in that state or whatever. But oftentimes they're closed. Taco Bell really is old reliable because it's usually open late. I'm always happy with it. Yeah, I mean, occasionally I'll switch it up. Like if I'm in Texas, for example, then I'm probably gonna grab Whataburger. If I'm in California, I'm probably gonna get In-N-Out. That's pretty much it. Other than that, I go Taco Bell. If I'm in another country, that sucks. You know, if I'm in London or whatever, I maybe I'll try to find what the hell is it called? The chicken place.
Nando's.
Nando's, yep. So
Nando's.
Yeah, you know, it's if I'm in like Germany, it's like who the hell knows wherever they take me, you know. So so yeah, it's but yeah, if I can find a Taco Bell, that's usually the option.
Taco Bell for Dijak. That's wild.
Yeah.
What's your go-to? What's your go-to on the menu? What do you get?
Number 10, grilled cheese steak burrito with a Diet Mountain Dew Baja Blast.
Way to go.
If this interview wasn't being done at I don't know what time it is for you, but for me it's 9:45 at night. So you can go watch most of my other interviews, and usually I have a can of Diet Baja Blasts, and I'm just sipping on it. This Taco Bell got me so addicted to it that I just buy sleeves of it now.
Well, as we begin to wind down, man, I kind of want to do something like you did, you know, what you did with CVV, but I want to know something that you're grateful for the indies now, just in general, compared to, you know, your career that you've been going on through, even in wrestling in general. What are you the most grateful for now?
Number one is the opportunity to provide for my family, doing what I love to do, right? I don't love everything about the pro wrestling business. That would be a disingenuous lie. And I find it hard to believe that there's anybody who loves everything about the pro wrestling business. Like there's a lot of difficult things about this. Like flying in an airplane is fun the first like 100 times you do it, but then it becomes like the thing you have to do every week. And I'm 6'7", 270 pounds, so I don't exactly fit in a coach seat very well. So if I'm lucky enough to get bumped up to first class, then that puts me in like a tolerable situation where I have to get on a plane and fly in the air, and you can't get out. Got to go to this other place and get off the plane and then walk through the terminal, go to the other plane, get on the plane, that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is I'm doing that, but I'm also sitting like this the entire time. That it hurts. Like it genuinely hurts, right? My body is suffering because of plane travel more so than like smashing my back on the mat. Like, and I genuinely believe that. I feel my worst after long plane rides. I had to fly 14 hours to India. Thank God I had extra leg room. It wasn't first class, but I at least could stretch my legs out. After I got off that plane, I swear I hurt more than any match I've ever had in my entire life. So that stuff, you know, lugging around all these bags, just time away from my family, all stuff that I don't enjoy about professional wrestling. But at the same time, like I have enough perspective to understand that, like, at the end of the day, I get to do what I love to do, which is the bell rings and I'm in the ring performing and having fun. And that's my full-time job. And then I get to go to the merch table. And that's the other part of my income is selling merch. And I get to have fun doing that because now I get to talk to these people and have these experiences, like I said. So, like, for the most part, everything that actually I'm able to monetize, I do enjoy. I enjoy these talks that we're having. Like, this is a fun part of my job and my employment. So I'm extremely thankful for all of that, right? To be able to provide for my family and pay our mortgage and pay our car bills and stuff like that, doing the things that I enjoy. I'm extremely, extremely thankful for that opportunity. I'm just glad that, like, independent wrestling exists to provide me with that opportunity. And if and when the day comes where I can sign another big contract, I'd be happy to do it under the right circumstances. But, you know, if that day doesn't come, I'm still able to make a living off of this, and I'm very, very fortunate because of that. And quite frankly, I'm very thankful to my time in WWE because it provided me this opportunity to do that, right? It's very rare that someone can make a living off of, like, a good living off of professional wrestling if they didn't have the exposure from a WWE or an AEW or maybe a New Japan or something like that. Right. So I'm very thankful for that opportunity and for, you know, the job I'm able to have right now.
I just want to touch one thing.
Sure.
Because, like I said earlier, we do production for a couple of indie companies in our area. Okay. Any wrestler that says they love to travel, even as production guys, that's a complete lie. Because we hate driving in the car more than we have to. That is
no. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I do kind of enjoy driving. I'll be completely honest. Anything that's an 8 or less hour drive, I actually look forward to it, especially if I have good company in the car. And when I'm in New England, I'm friends with a lot of the guys. Like Anthony Green is one of my best friends in the world. So traveling with him, I get to drive to New York City with him all the time. That's genuinely enjoyable for me because that's like my time with friends. I spend so much time here with my family when I'm home that, like, I don't, like, invite friends over for, like, cookouts and stuff. I'm just always with my family. So I see my friends when I'm traveling and when I'm on shows. So to me, that's like a night out with the boys is like driving to the town, you know, or whatever. So I'm always thankful for that opportunity because that's always better than flying on a plane by myself and, you know, staring at the wall for 5 hours, waiting to get my rental car, going to the hotel, staring at the hotel wall. You know, it's monotonous, like, especially in WWE, because just for a little bit of perspective, when I was in WWE, you got to remember, I was in a tag team for about a year on Monday Night Raw. And that was after I was with all my friends in the Thunderdome and Retribution. So I was kind of spoiled in a lot of ways because he has a million names. Right now he's Mason Madden and MXM. He was Mace when I tagged with him. Before that, he was Dio. His real name is Brennan. So we call him Brennan's, but he's one of my best friends in the world. And I was able to travel, like, the road with him. Like, we were town to town. And so I was spoiled in a sense. And then we got split up in the draft. And it was like for 2 years, I was just flying by myself, hotel by myself, going home. It was just this monotonous, like, here's the travel day, here's the travel day, here's the travel day, right? And so sometimes there's a lot of that. But now it's a good mix of the two, right? I get to drive sometimes. And this weekend, for example, I get to go to Scotland, which obviously sucks, because it's a terrible flight. But at the same time, one of my best friends in the world, Damo, has a place in Scotland, so he's letting me stay at his place. So this is all, great friend time for me that I don't get to see Damo that often. Now I get to spend the whole weekend with him, so I'm very much looking forward to that. So yeah, it's a mix for me.
I can attest. I hate driving if I'm not the one driving. Like being like we shared a car with some other professional wrestlers that we were going to Odessa for OSW.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, same thing. Legs sore as hell from a 6-foot man driving, and like very little leg room in like a Forerunner. What was it?
Yeah, we were like in a RAV4,
Forerunner or
man. Like
something.
we had no room, dude.
Yeah.
And we're big, dude, and we're large. We're large, you know,
We're large
on our
men.
end. So we're large men on our end, so we're just like, God.
Yeah, I believe
But
it.
that- but
Usually 9 times out of 10, I'm the one driving now, because just the way that it breaks down, typically, especially for local show. By local, I mean like 8 hours or less that I'm driving to. Usually, I'm able to because when people bring in someone from who used to be in WWE, usually built into that is like we'll pay for their flight and we'll pay for their hotel and things like that. But if I'm like, hey, I'll drive instead, then usually that ends up being much cheaper than a flight. So I'm like, oh, by the way, can you throw me an extra $100 for a rental car or whatever, and the gas that's going to take me? And they're like thrilled to do that because it's way cheaper than a flight. So usually I get the rental car, and then I can just throw like 5 people in the car with me and be like, hey, you can ride for free. And they're like, sweet, that's awesome, you know, because it's being, you know, covered by the company. So that's kind of why I usually end up being the driver, because I'm the one who kind of organizes the travel for the most part.
I love this, getting to talk a little bit more about it, more in depth. As we are reaching all our time, give us some dates that you have in the later part of June.
The one that sticks out the most is MLW. We have I just mentioned driving there with Anthony Green. I've got MLW on June 26th, and that's a big one for us. I debuted in New York City for MLW. I wrestled Matt Riddle for the championship in New York City for MLW, and now we're going back. And I think it's going to be a big event for us. So it's a Thursday night. It'll probably end up being sold out because New York's a great town, and they do a great job with that. Other than that, I can't think of what other dates I have off the top of my head. I'm keep checking my social media. I post pretty much everything there pretty consistently. But yeah, MLW is my big one right now.
And speaking of social media, where can everybody find you or get picked on Twitter?
Yeah, I try not to do it too much anymore. All my social media is at Dijak FYE, DIJAK FYE. FYE stands for Feast Your Eyes. But yeah, I mean, I used to lean heavily into the ratio stuff and I think people liked that and they gravitated to it, but it was also very polarizing. You know, a lot of people, I don't know if they found it childish or whatever. I think in a sense, I think I was trolling because I find Twitter and Instagram so meaningless at the end of the day. Like, yeah, it matters, and yeah, like it can, you know, it can work towards generating revenue or crowd reactions or whatever to a certain extent, but for the most part, it's like a percentage of the audience, right? So like at the end of the day, like one good vignette on television does way more than like 12, you know, excellent promos on Twitter. Even though on Twitter, like you see them and they go viral and it's got all this interaction and stuff, that doesn't account for like the 100 kids who are just sitting at home watching TV and just see something and go, wow, that was awesome. Because they don't get a voice to comment on Twitter or whatever, because they either don't have a Twitter or they don't use it or whatever. So yeah, to me, it was like, I would just do anything to get a rise out of people. And I think some people found it funny and some people found it like horribly offensive. And at the end of the day, if you're that concerned about social media and that concerned about Twitter and Instagram, then I think I learned the hard way through the retribution stuff and through the pandemic era that like, oh, you know, nobody at one point on Twitter, not a lot of people could say this. At one point on Twitter, like retribution every Monday night was like the number one trend for all the wrong reasons, right? So so it's like a rare sort of air that we were all in where it's like if I wrestled, it was like T-bar, number one trend on Twitter. And trust me, we were looking at it because it was our only source of feedback at that time, right? The screens and the noise and all and the thing was all fake. So we'd go to Twitter and be like, hey, did people like my match? And it'd be like T-bar trending one. I'd be like, oh, great. And then you'd go to look at the tweets and it's like, you're just scrolling like this. And you're like, oh my God, like they cannot possibly say anything worse than these thousands of tweets, right? So to have that perspective about Twitter, to understand that like I've seen the worst of it, right? It's to me, I'm just completely desensitized to it. Like, yeah, oh no, you know, you don't like that I say ratio. Okay, well, I've seen the cesspool of awfulness that was, you know, the peak of it. The only time I've trended on Twitter positively, ironically, was when I posted that letter saying that WWE wasn't re-signing me, and everyone was like overwhelmingly like, "Oh, well, we support you, and you had a great run, and all this other stuff." So, and I was the number one trend on Twitter for that. So I was like, "Oh, it's good to see this in a positive light for once," because usually it was like T-bar and like, "Get rid of this garbage, get this guy off. He's awful, fake Bane. You should, you know, burn in hell."
Fake Bane.
Fake Bane is wild.
Oh.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Twitter and social media. I don't take it too seriously because imagine if I did take it seriously and like every one of those 10,000 tweets I was taking to heart, I'd be like, I'd snap my phone in half and I'd go home screaming and crying, right? So I don't take it very seriously. Some people do though. So you know, it is what it is.
we gotta love it. Ladies and gentlemen, this was our conversation with one Donovan Dijak, and we will see each and every one of you guys in our next video. Bye.